All right, so we are in week 2 of our Family Feud series. We dedicate February to talking about relationships. Now, as I was thinking about that kind of introductory comment, I realized that really so we're talking about horizontal relationships and vertical relationships, our relationship with God, which is kind of what we talk about every week, right? It's like some kind of component, some version of that. But we focus specifically on relationships for February. It's something we did at our previous church, and we've brought that here. And we're going through Genesis, looking at some stories there. And today we're going to talk about Jacob and Esau to see what we can learn from their story. Before we get to that, I want to bring us all up to speed. Last week, Michelle talked a little bit about Adam and Eve, but specifically about Cain and Abel, the first 2 siblings, which ended in murder, right? Now, I'm an only child, so I don't know what it's like, but if you are a sibling and haven't murdered a brother or sister, you're doing pretty great by the standards of Genesis 4, right? Like, so well done, right? So you are better than Cain. Though I wouldn't get too haughty about that because that's likely to lead to something, really terrible, right? So don't get too cocky. But so we have Cain and Abel, and then we kind of are jumping ahead to Abraham and Sarah and their kids. So we're skipping over the flood and Noah, the Tower of Babel, and that kind of thing. We get to Abraham and Sarah, and this is where the story of Israel really begins. Everything prior to that is kind of an introductory, kind of a warm-up act. It's a preface leading us to the story of God really interacting with people in a way that, really, if you're a Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, you look back to Abraham and Sarah as kind of the starting point. They're key figures in this story. And I want to show you a map, because I like to do that occasionally, so we have an idea, because this will be relevant to my message today. If we look over to the right, where it says Babylon, Babylonian, that is where Abraham is from. Now, his dad, Terah, I believe, his wife had died, there's some sadness, and he decides to move. Okay, so they move, and his plan is to bring them all the way over to the left side, to Canaan. But they get to the top of the map to where Haran is, and he's like, I'm done. It's like a 1,200-mile journey. So he's, can you imagine that on camel walking? I've walked a long way. I've run a long way. 1,200 miles is a long time to go, right? So with a bunch of people, all their possessions, all that. Now, going back, Babylon, that area is important to our story as well. I'll talk more about that later. They get to Haran, and Dad's like, I'm done, and they just start developing the area. And eventually, Abram, at this point, brother Haran dies. And so the town still exists in Turkey, and it's named Haran, right? So that's still there. So Haran's there. After Abraham's dad dies, God speaks to Abraham and says, I want you to go to Canaan. Now, that's really interesting, because we read that through the lens of Christianity and Judaism, through the Old Testament, and assume that was kind of normal. But it wasn't really. Abram at this point is basically a pagan. Okay, he would have viewed God as local, and maybe a God that he could carry with him. It's likely he had idols carried with him. There would have been gods on mountains, that kind of thing. And you prayed, you sacrificed to that God, and hopefully God will give you babies and give you a harvest and victory in battle and that kind of thing. So that there would be a God that would speak to him and tell him to go somewhere else is a pretty far out idea for this time. So Abraham obeys. It's a really amazing story. He obeys and he goes. And so Abraham is the first in the line of patriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are 3 key figures in the story of God involving himself in the lives of humans. All this is before Moses, before the Torah, which is sometimes called the law, is more accurately the teaching, before God gives us his way of living and working things out, which is really much of what the Torah and the law is about. It's like, you got a problem with a brother or sister, here's how you fix it. You got a problem with, am I cutting out a little bit? Okay, I'm sitting still, so I'm not getting too excited. I apologize. So talking about Abraham or something, right? Right. So the law is much of it is like if you got a problem with a brother or sister, you do something wrong, you kill a goat or whatever. Here's how you fix it. You got a problem with God, you've sinned. Here's how you fix it. That's much of what the law is about. All these stories happen before that. The stories of the people that we're talking about, culturally, they're more Babylonian than what we would consider Jewish, right? So if you have any familiarity with the Old Testament or the New Testament kind of ethics or morals of how we're supposed to interact with one another, and then you read these stories and you're like, that doesn't seem right, it wasn't, right? So the Bible is full of a lot of information. Some of it is descriptive. It's like, do this stuff. Here's a good story. Here's some good information. Here's what we should believe. Here's how we should act. That's prescriptive, excuse me. Some of it's descriptive, where it's like, this is a thing that happened. Sometimes you're told if it's good or bad. Sometimes it's just a story that's just there. This is a lot of stories. Genesis is one of the weird things about Genesis. It's full of sibling rivalry. So much sibling rivalry. So many stories of how not to do things. And then we get to Exodus, which we won't cover today, where God's like, here's how you do it. Here's how you do better, how you live better. So we're reading these stories, and we have to remember that they're culturally Babylonian, which we'll unpack a little bit today, but that is really relevant to our story today. Isaac is the heir of Abraham, and Isaac marries Rebekah, who is a woman from his mother's clan. So Rebekah comes from Haran. So she's Babylonian, right? She's more pagan, more Babylonian. So Isaac marries Rebekah, who is from Sarah's clan. And they have two boys, Jacob and Esau. And that gets us today to our passage, Genesis 25. Let me read this for you. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. And when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau, which means hairy. What's in a name? Afterward, his brother came out and with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore him. Jacob means deceiver, which I once asked Mom, like, why'd you name me like that? It worked out. Esau was, I need to stop doing that. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore him. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So I'm an only child, as I said. Sibling rivalry is not something I relate to at all. It's just the closest thing on my mom's side, I'm the oldest kid by 10 years, so I started to get a little taste of cousin rivalry or envy, because I was so much older, I didn't really relate to them. But then I started hearing my grandparents kind of talk about my cousins who were these amazing swimmers, where like, I'm a pretty good skier, that's the closest thing I got to that. But then when we started having kids, I had this idea that I could raise kids, we could have a family with no sibling rivalry, right? Like I could crack the code. So I was going to love my kids equally, and they would know that, and there would be no tension on who is loved more, who is the favorite, right? That didn't happen, right? It's just this thing, right? And the fact is that my kids are, even though they come from the same gene pool, they're different from one another. And so you relate with them differently. And so even we're kind of a soccer home, you guys know that. And so, excuse me, I'm sorry about this. This is not a cue to shave my beard down. Nazarite vow. I'll take that. So we're a soccer family, and I coached both my kids. I coached Sophie for 3 years. Isaac I coached for 4 as a youth player, 2 years in college. But I was equally invested in their soccer, right? And so we'd go to games, we'd go to practices, all that stuff. Isaac and I could talk about soccer all day. Like, we play the video game, we talk about games that are happening in Europe, we talk about, conflicts or whatever. We talk about tactics and strategy and technique and players and how awful referees are, all that stuff. Hours and hours and hours, which of course Michelle loved. Sophie had about 4 minutes of soccer talk, and that was it. So she worked hard and played hard in practice and then did not want to talk about anything except for maybe how awful the girls were on the other team, because they're always the worst, right? So that's it. So like, even when you're trying to connect on the same thing, there's a division. There's a difference. It's hard to not have sibling rivalry. Parents aren't supposed to have favorites. Fact is, we do, right? It moves. Sometimes one's a favorite, sometimes the other. But Isaac connected with Esau. They were similar. Isaac loved the game. He loved that he went hunting, and he was a man of the wild, and he brought home game, and he made tasty food for him. Jacob was very different. He spent his days with his mom. His mom raised him in the ways of her homeland. Esau was the straight shooter, literally and figuratively, but Jacob was shrewd and conniving. Let's move on in our story. Verses 29 through 34. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom, which means red. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau is hungry, if not a little dramatic, right? We don't know. Some hunts are multiple days. Hunters go out into the wild, and they might be gone for a long time, and they bring some provisions, but they're going to kind of eat their way through the hunt. As they kill, they can eat, and then they bring back the surplus. We don't know how long he's been gone, but he's hungry. And the phrasing is kind of like, "I'm as hungry as a whole army," right? Like, he's kind of over the top here. He's a big guy. He's hungry. He wants something. And he says, "Give me this red stew," which could be easily translated red stuff. Like, give me anything to eat. And if you've ever been really, really hungry, you can you're envisioning food, right? When I've done really long, like, hikes, when I've done like 40 miles a day, I think about, you should never talk about food, right? But barbecue bacon cheeseburgers. Right? It's like, now you kind of want everyone, you just think about like fast calories. You dream about it. You can kind of feel it. And so Esau comes up. He's starving. Give me some of that red stuff. Now, ancient Near East custom was that the firstborn was very, very important, right? And the firstborn would get the majority of the estate of their dad. So they would get 50, sometimes 90% of it. So they would get quite a bit more. So if you could have 6 boys and one is going to get the vast majority. It was a big deal. It was expected that the firstborn was going to be special. They were special, and that they would take over for their dad, and they would receive a double honor or more. So Esau knows this. He's the oldest by a moment, but he's still the oldest. And he's expecting that he will get his rights as the firstborn. But he sells this for a meal. So Esau is tricked, or just doesn't care enough, is unethical enough, because this is kind of an unethical thing. We sang the song about the prodigal son, and when the prodigal son, which really there's 2, both sons in that story are prodigals in different ways, but the son who leaves, when he asks for his share of the inheritance, he's basically saying to his dad, culturally, "You're kind of dead to me now. Right? I don't really care." So it's quite an offense to ask for your inheritance early. And so, but that's what the son does. Esau is kind of saying, "I don't really care. I don't care about all of that. I just want some red stuff." But he's also being tricked by his conniving brother. Right? So there's a couple things at play. Both have some ethical issues here, some ethical problems. Let's move on into, we're gonna talk about chapter 27. I won't read the whole chapter for you, but let's keep moving in our story. Here's verses 1 through 4. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau his older son and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Isaac is old. He's losing his eyesight. He knows he's going to be dying soon. And so he wants to plan for this sacred moment of passing on the estate and also giving his blessing. Now, as you read the Old Testament and in ancient Near East custom, blessings were a very big deal. Some seen as prophetic, right? That this is what I have for you. What's interesting about that is we get that kind of culture in the Bible, and yet quite often these blessings don't come true. So while they don't come true, there's a huge amount of importance put on them. These are sacred moments. It isn't meant to just be prophetic, this is what's going to happen, but this is what I hope for you. This is what I plan for you. This is what I want to see happen. This is what I see in you. So to receive a blessing from the patriarch was a very, very big deal. And again, most often, the oldest receives the biggest blessing. If you're familiar, if you jump forward, in a couple weeks, we'll talk a little bit about Israel. Jacob becomes Israel, has 12 kids, and all that stuff. When he gives his blessing, Reuben, his oldest, does not get the best blessing because he did something gross, right? And so he's held accountable for that. So it doesn't always happen, but that is what the plan is. Esau will hunt, will cook the food that Isaac likes and the way he likes it, and after dinner, Isaac will bless his oldest son, and he will give him his estate. This is what I have for you. But Rebekah overheard the plan. She comes up with a way to get the blessing for Jacob, for her favorite son. Culturally, as a Babylonian, this is totally acceptable, to be sneaky and conniving and find a way to weasel in to get what you want. So she has a plan to trick her husband into giving the blessing to her favorite son. Her idea is this: while Esau is out hunting, you go kill a lamb and I will cook the food in the way that your dad likes. I know what he likes. I'll cook the food and you'll present it to him and he will give you the blessing intended for Esau. And Jacob's like, what? He's hairy and I'm smooth, and he smells of the wild and I hang out in tents with my mom, and so we smell different. We're different people, right? That's what its story is. So she said, I got a plan for that too. We'll put fur on the back of your hands and on the back of your neck, and when you deliver the food and he calls you forward, he'll touch the fur and he'll smell you, and you'll smell like game, like Esau, and you will get the blessing. And it works. Isaac is old, and he is going blind, and the voices are different, but the smell is the same, the feel is the same, and the food is the same, and so surely this is my boy Esau, and it works. Rebekah tricks her husband into blessing her favorite child. Moving forward, verse 41. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. So he knows dad is going to die soon, and then there'll be a period of mourning, and when that's over, I'm going to kill him. And he has the weapons, and he has the skill, and he has the anger, right? He's been betrayed. And ethically, it would be completely acceptable to kill his brother in this situation. Moving on. But the words of Esau, her older brother, were told to, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran. Remember Haran? And stay with him a while your brother's fury turns away. So Rebekah says, you need to go back to Mesopotamia, back to the Babylonian culture I'm from. You'll go and be safe there. Michelle's going to talk about some of what happened there next week. So the idea is go away. Get out of Dodge, go away while Esau calms down. And when he calms down, we'll send for you. And besides, Rebecca kind of hopes that he'll find a wife there because she hates the kinds of women that Esau's dating. She just loathes those women. So maybe you'll find someone that I relate to, someone that I like, someone that's culturally more like me than these women because they're driving me bonkers, right? It's in the Hebrew. Right? She wants someone from back home, someone like her, someone who thinks like her. So she wants her son to go and learn more about her culture and to embed himself more in that culture. One of the questions we have, I studied psychology in undergrad, one of the questions we have in psychology and much of life is, how do we become who we are? Is it nature, right? The genes we have? Is it nurture, the environment we grow up in? Which is it? And a little bit even still kind of depends on who you ask. It's likely a mixture of things, a combination of things. We're born with some propensities, but we can be very different people. We know this from twin studies and all that stuff. Twins can be separated at birth and grow up and do have very similar interests and yet have some differences and all that stuff. Spiritually, religiously, one of the other questions is, are you also cursed? Right? So we see, I don't have a slide for this. John 9 says this, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? We've talked about this through our look at Matthew. There's multiple instances where the assumption is someone's malady, someone's struggle is because they are being punished for either their sin or perhaps their parents or someone else's sin. That this is a consequence of sin. It's a punishment. So is it nature, nurture, or curse? The first commandment says something similar. In Exodus 20, I believe I have a slide for this. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, this is speaking specifically of idol worship, and in this context, it would be a literal idol that you worship, maybe while also worshiping Yahweh, maybe instead of. God is trying to root that out. He's trying to de-paganize the Israelites and lead them into an understanding of how to worship him. But is God saying that he's going to punish my great-grandkids if I get this wrong? I mean, that's what it says. Is that what that means? I don't think so. You put all the passages along these lines together, it does not mean that our sin is going to be, that our descendants are going to be punished for our sin. But it does mean that our sin can cause problems for future generations. In this context, at this time in history, it was not uncommon for 2, 3, and 4 generations to live in the same tent, in the same vicinity. And no matter what, the matriarch and patriarch, the oldest, would have been the most influential and powerful, no matter how old they are, in that home. Even if they are no longer paying the bills and they're being supported by their kids or grandkids, the matriarch and patriarch would have been the most influential. So you can imagine, and they're not working, so perhaps they're also helping with childcare and all that stuff. You can imagine the influence. It sounds wonderful, right? Everyone just raise your hand if that's your dream. Just kidding. So, if there's some infidelity at the top level, or some profound anger issues, or some addictive behavior at the top level, and you're living in that environment, it's going to trickle down, isn't it? It's going to affect generations. We pass those things on, and it has consequences. And God is trying to warn his people. He's trying to take his people from an individualistic perspective to more of a community perspective. What you do matters to other people, and that needs to matter to you. There are consequences for your choices that affect other people. It isn't just about you. It isn't just about doing what's right for you, like Rebecca was teaching Jacob to do, right? It is about living for other people, being part of a community, recognizing that your sin, your decisions, your good and bad decisions have a lasting and reciprocal effect, and you need to care about that. One of the great joys of being a parent is seeing a little of yourself and your spouse in your kids, right? It's just fun to watch that and to see what comes of that. I, at one point, I wanted to be a history teacher. It's only because I did really well in U.S. history my junior year. It's like, I did smarter than the smart, or did better than, I did smarter than the smart kids because I read good, right? I did really well. So I want to be a history teacher. And so I have a little interest in history. Isaac has a great interest in history, and he keeps it all straight in his head. I do not. So one of the great joys of being a parent is seeing a little of you and your spouse kind of in your kids. Conversely, one of the great laments of parenthood is seeing a little bit of you both in your parents, the other stuff. Not Michelle, just me, right? We pass on other stuff too. When we first got married, we graduated college, and at that time, Howard was the president of a Bible college in North Dakota. So Michelle got a job there as a hall director. Had nothing to do with the fact that Daddy was president. It just, And then I moved kind of after her, and I worked in the maintenance team. I was the paint crew leader, so I painted. I had a student crew, and it's a small school with a small maintenance team, and our plumber was named Tex. Tex, I don't even know, he was from Texas, I don't know, had a bit of a drawl. He had long hair, and his dream was, he was a recovering addict. His dream was to work with addicts, but he was the plumber. And one time there was a plumbing issue that he had to access the pipe from outside. So he like a lot of plumbers, we'd start work at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So I had to help dig. And digging is the worst, right? It just doesn't end. So we're digging this hole, and it took like 2 days to dig the hole out or something. At one point, this professor walked by, and she's like, Jake, you must have done something horrible in a former life that you are stuck doing this. So good Bible college humor. While we're talking, Tex was talking about his son at this point, his oldest was in high school, and he's like, I love my son, but I'm seeing some of the things he got from me, and I feel terrible about that, right? I don't like that. And of course, they're butting heads about that. And most parents have had the moment where you're about to lay into your kid or whatever. You're like, oh, I did that same thing last week or something very similar, and that's my fault. We pass things on. I think we see the sins of the father and mother displayed in full color through the conflict between Jacob and Esau. Their parents chose favorites, and they stacked the decks. They didn't just connect more with one or the other. They picked a favorite, and they loved one or the other. And they did everything they could to give them a leg up over their sibling. Not just in the world, but over their sibling. But deceit and trickery are cultural norms in Babylon. So Rebekah did what came naturally. She protected her own. She passed on bad conflict resolution skills to her boys that resulted in tearing them apart from each other, and years of turmoil between them, and centuries of distrust between their families. Last week, Michelle talked about family feuds. This one was Rebekah's fault. She created this scenario. And Isaac's part of it too, right? They picked one over the other and let the division grow, though Rebekah seems to have fanned the flame quite a bit. The sins of the parents are passed on to generations. They affect many, many people. Their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids, and on were affected by this moment of tricking Isaac into blessing Jacob over Esau and choosing one over the other. Jesus calls us to different cultural norms, to different ways of living, to a different culture. I don't think I have a slide for this verse in Matthew. Jesus says simply, let your yes be yes, your no be no. Be honest. Have integrity. Say what you mean and do what you say. Be like that. Anything more comes from evil, he says. These aren't just bad decisions. These are evil decisions. This is an evil motivation. This is an evil way to relate. This is not what God has for us. God has something quite different. Be honest. Don't deceive. But we're not given just to try harder, though effort on our part is part of the life of faith, right? We don't just wait for God to do it. We do partner with him. We have self-control. We make choices. Jesus, worship team, if you want to come up. Jesus gives us the Holy Spirit who wants to fill us with the fruit of the Spirit. And those are things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. He wants to help us become better citizens of the kingdom, better for our families, right? To lead us away from conniving and self-service and trickery and to serving others. So we're talking about our vertical relationships and our horizontal relationships. And really at the intersection is the church, right? We come together, honest, sacred together. And the prayer room will be open in a moment. Prayer team, if you want to go there. You might want to go and say, yeah, I kind of struggle with dishonesty. And I'm seeing the effects of that. It feels good, feels right in the moment. It solves the problem in the short run, but it has lasting effects. I can be a little sneaky. I can. I need to confess that. So we have some homework for you. Listen to God's voice regarding the relationships in your life. Here's a question. What is God saying to you about integrity and honesty? For homework, you could really just keep reading Proverbs, but maybe Proverbs 2 would be a good place to start. Horizontal relationships are between you and others. In moments of relational conflict or strain, look for where you are vulnerable to the presence of sin. In what situations do you have a hard time acting with honesty and integrity? All of us have moments when we're strong and we feel good, and other moments where we're a little bit more susceptible, a little bit more vulnerable to kind of let things slide. And you might say it's just a little white lie, it's just a little bit whatever. No one's perfect. We aren't called to be perfect. We're called to submit our hearts to Jesus and to let him to continue to work in us and work through us. That is the sanctification process. We will all be on it until we die. We will not see perfection on this side of heaven. But there may be a part of your life where you're like, that's not as bad as Rebecca. Great, good. But maybe not as good as what Jesus has for me. So we're going to repeat the song that we ended with, this prodigal son story, the song, really about two kids who misunderstood God's grace and love and faithfulness, but to whom God made himself available and ready and went out to. God is reaching out to us, calling us to something better, and giving his Holy Spirit to us.